What is going on, NCTI friends? Welcome to the 4th episode of Wired Wisdom, presented by NCTI. My name is James, and today I'll be reviewing the events revolving around an incident that recently came to our attention. The incident that we'll be discussing comes out of Vassar, Michigan, and takes place near the corner of Beach Street and South Water Street. Now, some of the images we will be showing were taken by D'Angelo McQueen after an accident. Mr. McQueen was involved in an incident where the utility pole he was working on gave way and fell to the ground. Now, luckily, Mr. McQueen didn't sustain any injuries. This scenario hits very close to home for any technician that works in the field. Most of you climb at least a few poles a day, if not more. Although this accident happened to Mr. McQueen, it could happen to anybody. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you perform the necessary pole checks prior to climbing? 100% of the time? It's something to think about, because if you're not, this could very well happen to you. We'll take a more in-depth look at what occurred, whether it could have been avoided, and what other steps could have been taken to make the situation safer.
And here we are, Vassar, Michigan. Let's zoom in and look at where the incident occurred. Here is an image of the pole that fell over. This is a Google image that was taken in 2009, and at the time, there wasn't plant built out to this pole. Another key observation is that there is one power drop heading southeast from the pole to a jumper pole located at the property across the street. There is also one down guy heading north from the pole. Here's an image from the day of the accident. Notice the new strand attached and the new down guy in the picture. Okay, let's switch back to the Google map and discuss this. The strand and plant extension that was attached to the pole was maybe a few weeks old by the time Mr. McQueen had visited the address. Construction came out and built out this stretch of plant to provide service to the customer that Mr. McQueen was servicing. The total span appears to be a little over 300 feet to the attachment on the other pole. This added stress could have been a factor in the pole falling. I should also mention that the pole was 70 years old. It was installed in 1947.
So what happened? There are a couple circumstances that may have come into play to create this perfect storm. First, the pole had been relatively undisturbed for most of its existence. Primary power and the down guy offset each other to hold the pole in its position from north and south. The secondary power drop added a little more tension to the west. The newly installed cable strand and secondary down guy reinforced that tension from the north and south. On the day of the install, Mr. McQueen performed his pole inspection starting with a hammer test. Then he probed the base of the pole with an 8-inch screwdriver and then performed a rocking test by firmly moving the pole horizontally with his ladder. Nothing out of the ordinary was found. Second, because the pole checked out and nothing appeared to be out of the ordinary, Mr. McQueen ascended the ladder, belted off, and attached a J-hook to the pole. Everything was still okay. Mr. McQueen then descended the ladder, got some tools, and then ascended the ladder for the second time. This is when the pole gave way. Just about the time Mr. McQueen reached the strand, he noticed some play in the pole. The down guy started to pull out of its anchor position as the pole started to move west towards the street. Mr. McQueen thankfully wasn't belted off yet and started to climb down the ladder, eventually jumping to his safety. The third and final circumstance in this incident was the fact that the base of the pole was rotten 16 inches below the surface of the ground. So, taking into account the pole's age, the tension from the newly installed strand, the tension from primary and secondary power, and how the pole appears to be top-heavy, you have the perfect recipe for this incident to occur. All right, so how could we avoid this situation or make this situation safer? Well, to be honest, I'm not sure what else Mr. McQueen could have done. He performed all the necessary checks: sound test, probe test, and rocking test. OSHA outlines these tests under standard number 1910.268. OSHA states that you should sharply wrap a pole with a hammer weighing about 3 pounds and use a pole prod or screwdriver that is at least 5 inches long. Mr. McQueen used his company-issued 8-inch screwdriver and a 3-pound hammer. OSHA also specifies using the rocking test, which Mr. McQueen did by shaking his ladder against the pole prior to climbing it. Additionally, OSHA states that you could use a pike pole or wrap a rope around the pole and pull the test. Standard 1910.268 contains subsection 2, which explains inspecting wood poles. These listed tests should always be considered prior to climbing. I did notice quite a few vertical cracks in the pole, but that wouldn't necessarily raise a flag if you're using a ladder to climb a pole. What about soil conditions? I did notice that the area was close to a river and that this incident happened in early spring. Maybe the soil conditions were not optimum, which allowed the pole to move more than it would under a drier condition. Who knows? Here's what I do know. Always perform a thorough pole check prior to climbing. Inspect the pole layout to determine what the best path would be to access your equipment. And if you don't have a 3-pound hammer and a probing tool, then I would suggest getting them. These are good tools to own to help you stay safe in the field. When it comes to safety, always prepare and prevent, don't repair and repent. Thanks for watching. Be safe out there.